And we're recording right now as well.
Okay, great.
Make sure there's no fake news on here, huh?
Really?
This is true. Okay, we have people joining now.
Great.
I think I'll step aside. They don't need to see my ugly face before 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we could.
I'll show you my books. Right now, Donna, they're seeing Kathy and me. Is that what's showing up on there?
Yes, it'll be the person who's speaking is
Oh.
what they'll see.
Okay. Kathy, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, Donna, are we ready to go?
10 o'clock.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first TUARA Talks. We're so pleased that you're able to join us today. I'm Kathy Andreen. I'm Vice President of TUARA this year, and also bring greetings from Barry Mason, our president, who I hope will be checking in soon, but wasn't able to be here at the beginning of the meeting. TUARA Talks is a new program that we're trying. where we're inviting our members to do presentations on some of the really interesting things that they are doing in their retirement, or in Ron's case today, he's not quite retired yet. Before I introduce him though, let me just mention one other event that we have coming up next week. On December 15th, we're doing a drive-through meeting or drive-through opportunity to come through and pick up a mask from AERA. They have sent us masks, and who doesn't need a new mask these days? And pay your dues either by check or by credit card. And also we're asking people to bring a non-perishable food item, peanut butter or some other type of non-perishable food, to donate to temporary emergency services for their food pantry, because there are so many people in need, especially this time of year and thanks to the pandemic. So our first presentation today is from Ron Dulek. He's the treasurer of TUARA right now. For the last 15 years, Ron and his wife Sally have spent part of their summers living in the African bush. So his presentation is titled "How to Sit with an Elephant." And this provides an opportunity for us to hear about some of their adventures in Africa. And we're also going to learn how to approach and sit with the wild African elephant. And the presentation comes from Ron's recently published book, Sitting with Elephants. Ron is the John R. Miller Professor of Management in the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama, where he teaches strategy and management in the MBA and EMBA programs. The book is available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and Waldorf Publishing. All profits from the sale of the book are given to an African educational trust fund supporting the educational needs of children in one of the major African provinces. So it sounds like a really exciting presentation. And Ron, please go ahead.
Thank you. I can't see who's out there. I can just see that there's the participants number. But if you have questions, if Larry Foster is out there, I will say thank you for and a couple of you sent me emails or texts in advance. Larry wrote, if the little Polish guy with the big ears begins to flap them wildly, does that mean he's upset? And the answer is yes. And I thank all of you who've already sent me insults about doing this presentation. I'm sure in the process of it, there'll be many more for you to have. Because I can't hear you, if you do have anybody, if you have questions, there's that question and answer section at the bottom of the webinar. And if you have questions or you want to just make comments, put them on there and I'll look at those when we finish, okay? And I'm honored to do this first presentation. When they were discussing doing these presentations, they wanted something that's extremely useful. And that's why I came up with this very useful topic of how to approach an elephant. I mean, this isn't just glib and it's not metaphoric either. I mean, you might be walking down University Boulevard one day and you see an elephant and you say, man, I'd really, really, really like to walk up to that elephant. And I'm going to be able to give you advice on how to do that, Let me first give you 3 premises behind this presentation, okay? And I'll be honest, I use these in my MBA class on the first day of class as well. I think these are 3 really, really important premises, and I think you'll see them linking through this presentation. The first one is that the unexamined experience is not worth having. I really think that one of the things I worry about in society today is we don't reflect enough. We're so busy, we don't stop to reflect. I think we ought to stop and think about what's happening to us. And Lonnie Strickland, my friend who actually introduced me to Africa, says that he told me he was doing this, so I started doing this too, pushing the students this semester to either keep a journal or send themselves emails about the COVID experience. Because this is a really, really unique time. And 30, 40, 50 years from now, when their grandchildren ask them, what was it like in 2020? It might be really nice to go back to your journal or your email and say, and give that to your grandchildren and say, here's what it was like. So don't just go through the experience, think about it too. Think about it too. The second, which relates to this, is to become a second level thinker. I push this concept really, really hard. I stole this concept from a guy named Howard Marks, who runs an investment firm called Oak Tree Capital. Now, what Howard Marks contends is that you should use this for investing purposes. I think you should use it almost to live your life. The key to being a second level thinker is to answer a real simple question. Who doesn't know this already? Who doesn't know this already? The more you start asking that question, the more you become a little upset with some of the information that comes at you, because so much of it is so obvious already. I just did that myself when I said that the COVID is a unique experience. We've been hearing that a lot in the last 9 months. You know, a second level thinker would be somebody who'd say the COVID experience has pushed us 5 years into the future immediately. You know, in business, you hear in the business school all the time people saying Amazon has reshaped the retail environment. We got that one figured out. How are we going to respond to it? What do we do? You know, a second level thinker doesn't just take the obvious. It's a deeper kind of thought. And this last principle or premise is squeeze the juice. No matter what the experience, and I think it ought to be out of your life, I think you ought to try and get everything you can out of the experience or out of your life, whether that's in retirement or if you're just starting a career or whatever. I think it's important to kind of squeeze the juice. Taking these three premises, and particularly the squeeze the juice premise, my wife and I, about 15 years ago, were discussing how we wanted to spend the latter years of our life. Our children were growing and independent, and we of course thought about a condo in Florida or something like that. And what we wound up doing instead is buying a bush house in South Africa. The house borders Kruger Park, which is one of the largest national parks in Africa. Lonnie Strickland was already in Africa, and we'd been guests of Lonnie and Kitty on a number of occasions, and so it was kind of I talked to Lonnie about it, and he thought it was wonderful. And what I wound up doing actually is buying the house online without ever having seen it. And I found the house online. I found it in August of 2005 or 6. And I tried to get the buyer and the realtor to let me wait until the following summer to see it, to visit it, and they wouldn't do it. So I cut a deal with the realtor, because the realtor told me that I would like it, which realtors are apt to say. I've never seen a realtor who says you won't like it. But he did do this for me. He said that if I didn't like the house, he would sell it without a commission for me. So that was enough. And my wife and I went forth and we bought this house in South Africa. That's my wife, Sally, sitting on the back. And this shot is from a fence, which is about 10 meters from Kruger Park. It was originally they've upgraded it now, but there was an old wire fence back here about 10 meters. So this is shot from with my back to Kruger Park onto the house. And let me share with you first a couple things about the house that might be of interest to you. Here's where we park our car. We occasionally have problems with South Africans call them zebras, that they come in to get out of the sun, and you actually have to get in and shoo them out of the garage area, the parking area, so that you can park in there. This is at the top of our driveway. That's a baby giraffe. We have a number of acacia trees in our driveway, and giraffes love to eat the leaves on acacia trees. This also is in our driveway. The animals move freely between Kruger Park and our house, except for lions and elephants, because the fence keeps them out. Leopards jump or come through the trees, so they come in and out. They're actually reasonably safe. I mean, you wouldn't get out if you saw him, but during the day, they'll tend to leave you. They'll leave you alone most of the time. You don't go out walking at night. This is a picture taken at the back fence. Mr. Saban is also recruiting him as an offensive lineman. And this is another picture taken at the back fence Nick is also recruiting this person as a defensive player. That's an African Cape buffalo. Here's where we cook at night. We cook outside at night in this area, and we cook over an open fire, and you can see those lanterns. We light those lanterns and surround ourselves with fire for safety, because the animals won't cross fire. And we have a rather large fire in that center section there for safety purposes. This is a nearby hotel. It's called the Protea Hotel at Kruger Gate. It's about 20 minutes to get over there. Our house is down a hill and on the Sabi River. And so the result is we don't have electricity. We use solar power. We also don't have any cell phones. So there's no internet. There's no way of contacting people. I've negotiated a deal with this hotel, and you can see in the back, a little bit right of center as you look at your screen, there's a room back there. It's a television room, and the hotel lets me come back there to use their internet facility there. And this room becomes the key to my story, because as I go there daily to check in to make sure that no one is looking for us, because there's no other way of reaching us. And it's also the place where safari guides hang around between their jobs. And so I've gotten to be friends with some of these safari guides, and I'm interested in what they know about Africa and animals, and they're interested in an old white man who comes to Africa for which they can't quite understand why. And so they've taught me a tremendous amount. And that's what leads to our story here, because after a few years of visiting and all of those animals coming to the back fence, I became desirous of learning to approach an elephant. Elephants come up to our back fence a lot. And so I started asking these safari guides if they could teach me how to approach an elephant. And they did, and I'm willing to share that knowledge with you here today. So should you be walking around today sometime or anytime this week, and you see an elephant and you want to approach it, let me share with you the safari guide's advice on how to do this. The first thing is your attitude. You must, the guides inform me, you must be humble, okay? That elephants do not like arrogance. And so you must be humble. It's not difficult being humble in the presence of an elephant. And so, you both have to be humble in spirit and in terms of appearance. So in other words, you don't stare at the elephant, you look down. And one of the things I've learned that's really interesting, and it's the guides taught me this, predators stare. And so therefore you don't stare at almost any animal except the predator, because the stare is seen as threatening to them. And so you look down, and then you can gradually and slowly start moving toward that elephant. At some point, the elephant will put out its ears. And what he or she is saying to you at that point is, I'm aware of you, you're in my presence. And so you pause for a moment to get to kind of adjust, for the elephant to adjust and you yourself to adjust as well. And then you can continue walking towards him or her. And you also, while you're not staring, you do glance up, and you can see this. I chose this picture because it was one of my favorites, but it also shows it really well. You see just above her eyes, there's a kind of it's actually a gland opening up above her eyes. If she is in stress or in must, you will see fluid coming out of that area. If it's wet up there, then don't try to approach the elephant, get out of there. She's stressed or under, he or she is stressed or under a lot of strain, or sexually active, and you don't want to be there. Get out of there. If it's dry, you can continue moving slowly toward the elephant. And at some point now, the elephant will do what is called a mock charge. What he or she will do is will start coming. Often she will trumpet and aim the tusks right at you and come charging right towards you. Now the guides assured me that she would stop when she got to be about 3 to 4 meters away, or about 10 to 15 feet away. I can tell you, you question the legitimacy of the guides when that elephant starts to charge. When you're standing out there in the bush by yourself and that elephant comes tearing at you, it is an intimidating feeling. It's not difficult to be humble, but for 3 or 4 years, every time this would happen to me, I would run away screaming like a little girl, a little child. The guides made a lot of fun of me. They teased me a lot but they never teased me about running away. Instead, what they would do is they would tend to say, "It's all right, you're not ready yet." Sometimes they told me I wasn't humble enough. Sometimes they said, "You'll know when you can stay. It's okay to run away. You'll know when you don't need to run away." And I genuinely didn't believe. I actually asked, one of the things that I asked the guides one time was, I said, "Have you ever done this?" And they said, "No, but we're sure it works." And they countered with, "Well, priests give marriage counseling, so we're kind of the priests of the bush, and we can guarantee you that this works." But one day I was out in the bush, and this elephant and I came by, and we went up through the states I just described to you, and she charged, or mock charged, and I had absolutely no desire to move. I felt safe. And she came up to about 15 feet away and stopped and kind of tilted her head and looked at me and kind of went, "Why didn't you run?" And I just felt safe. I felt invigorated, but I felt extremely safe. We stayed in each other's presence for about 30 seconds, and she kind of shook her head and turned and went off. I went back to the house, woke my wife, who was sleeping because it was early in the morning, and I can't tell you what the only thing I could think of what it must feel like, it would be like a jet pilot fighter who lands for the first time on an aircraft carrier. It just was exhilarating. And I thought it was over. I thought, well, I've done it. The next day, my wife and I are sitting on the back stoop of that house, and this elephant comes back. She comes back, she stands by the fence, and she falls asleep. My wife asked me, she said, "Are you going to go down there?" And I said, "I didn't anticipate this. No, I'm afraid when she wakes up, I might scare her." And when I went to the guides, they told me she was showing me that she trusted me. They said, "You should have done it. You could have sat beside her." And I just thought, that it was an experience that I had missed. And we soon flew back to Tuscaloosa. The next year, I'm thinking the experience is over. We go back the next year, and she not only returns, she returns on 10 different times, and at times brings along her the entire herd with her, a herd of 22 elephants. And on 10 different occasions, I was able to go down. And incidentally, and I heard you don't have to deal with the mock charge. But what I discovered I could do is I would go toward them just as I described. They would recognize me and acknowledge I was coming. And then I would go down on my butt and kind of scoot till I was about 3 to 4 feet away from them. So it was an absolutely amazing experience. I did not take pictures. Some people asked me to take if they could take pictures of it, and I said no, because it was like a private experience. But the last day, this is the day we actually left, my wife took these few pictures that I'm going to share with you. She did it without my permission, but I'm really glad that she did. The elephants often paraded their children, their babies, by me. And I became kind of illogical here. I became convinced they could tell what I was thinking. I don't know why an elephant can speak English when it's in Africa, but I would mentally be saying things like, "You just have an absolutely beautiful family." And she would show off her family to me. Now, the guides told me this wouldn't happen because it was too trusting, but I can document it a little bit with a picture. The elephants actually were lying down beside me. And so I would lie down with them to show the trust. And I will add that a number of bugs came up my pant legs, and I came back to Tuscaloosa with a lot of bug bites. But fortunately never got ill for it or anything like that. And it was just an absolutely wonderful summer. I came back to Tuscaloosa, just couldn't wait to get back to Africa. And I even convinced my daughter to come to visit and to bring my granddaughter, who at the time was 7 years old, because what I said that I wanted to do was take my granddaughter down to the fence to sit with the elephants. My contention was that the elephants, she was showing me her family, I wanted to show her mine. My daughter was a little hesitant about this, but she agreed as long as she came along. And so the first opportunity we returned to Africa with bringing along my daughter and granddaughter, and the elephants do not show up. The only thing that shows up is this monkey. And that was the only thing that showed up all the time my daughter and my granddaughter were there. And I allowed my granddaughter, violating the rules, to start feeding this monkey a daily banana. And when they left and came back to Tuscaloosa, the monkey continued to show up every day. So I would give it its banana. Near the end of our visit, the monkey actually stole my breakfast bowl. He came into the house on a couple of occasions. I had to chase him out. And then he stole my breakfast bowl, and I had to chase him to try and get it back, which in itself had to look kind of silly. This old man running in the bush chasing a monkey who's carrying a bowl. And she threw the bowl and broke, and the monkey and I had words. But the rest of the story that I'm going to share with you now happens very, very quickly, okay? And I'm going to seem like it's a non sequitur, but I'm going to try and connect this all at the end, okay? I'm describing the end of this visit, the last 2 to 3 days of our visit for this year. This is the hotel that I showed you earlier. This is the dining area. I'm very close to the staff here. And my wife and I, the day I'd actually chased the monkey out for the last time, we're having lunch, and the server at this time, her name was Elsie. And Elsie revealed to us that another server, whose name was Johannes, that his daughter had been killed in a car accident. The daughter was leaving for college, and the van she was in tipped over, and Elsie was going to the service. And I asked, my wife said to me when Elsie walked away, "Do you think Elsie needs a ride?" And so I asked her, and she said yes. So I wound up giving Elsie and 8 other people packed into my car a ride to this service. And while we were on the way there, and one of the man sitting next to me got a phone call from Johannes, and they were talking in Afrikaans in Shangun, so I couldn't understand their language. But when the conversation was over, he said, "Johannes wants to see you." So I drove them back into a very, very poor area, and very remote, like a bad movie, on dirt roads and so forth. And the service had started, and the women were under a tent singing, and Johannes came out from the house, and we hugged and we talked briefly, and there's nothing you can say, and I started thinking about staying. I started thinking about that I should stay because of the message it was sent, crossing racial, global lines and so forth. And Elsie, and here's a picture of Elsie from 2 years ago when I was invited to her retirement dinner. Elsie came up to me and said, "Professor, it's time for you to leave." And I said, "Thank you, Elsie." And I got in my car and left. The next day, a woman named Ava, who runs the laundry, again, I'm friends with the staff, came up to me and she said, "I hear you were at the services for Johannes's funeral yesterday." And I said I was. And she said, "There was a big argument last night about that. Some people were very offended that you were there. They thought it wasn't your place." And I said, "Oh," and she said, "Yeah, but Johannes really defended you because he said that the two of you are good friends and that you're coming there briefly meant a lot to him." It's an interesting little aside. When I come back from the funeral, the very day I come back from the funeral, the elephants return. They return. They have broken the fence. They're in our yard and in the area nearby. I my wife was watching them. I went down and sat with the elephant that we call our elephant. And she was very nervous. She was not calm. And there were two other elephants right beside her. And what she did then, and this happens very quickly, they ran along the fence and then crushed another part of it. And then they turned, the three of them turned, they crushed it here. They now turn and they start coming toward me. People had asked me where this was going to end. And my initial statement was, I wanted the elephants to touch me with their trunks. I actually said sometimes I wanted to roll under the fence and be touched by them. Lonnie Strickland, who has forgotten more about the bush than I know, told me, don't do that. He said, you cross that fence, you'll be in trouble. And when since they had crossed it, but they were coming toward me, they were not charging, they were kind of trotting. And one side of me said, this is going to be the experience of a lifetime. The other side said, get out of here. The previous 2 weeks earlier, a ranger had been killed in the park by an elephant. The elephant had charged. The ranger scared the elephants. The elephant charged. She tripped, and one elephant picked it up in its trunk and threw her. And my thought was, I didn't think the elephants would hurt me, but I thought that they, not by intention, but they might hurt me accidentally, not realizing I'm a frail human, not an elephant. And if they picked me up by their trunks, if I stayed and they caught me with the trunks, there's nothing I could do to get out. And so I ran away. It really confused the elephants. And she ran up to this area by their fence and then peeked over. And for the next 5 nights, the elephants continued to break into our compound. And eventually the local authorities came and they said, we've got to stop this. And what they chose to do was to electrify the fence. They had a couple of options, but they chose to electrify the fence. And my wife and I were out that evening and we heard her hit the fence and she screamed in pain. She then walked along the fence and came up to where we were and gurgled with her stomach, which is one of the 3 ways elephants speak. They speak by trumpeting through their feet and then by gurgling. And I don't know if she was saying, how dare you do that to me, or if she was saying, warning the other elephants to stay away. But she then left, and my wife looked at me and said, why did she have to suffer that kind of pain so you can sit with elephants? And she left, and I wind up sitting out in the dark by myself, kind of going, I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I'll finish my story in a moment, but let me stop for a minute about some second level thoughts of sitting with elephants. What did I learn from this? What did I reflect? One thing is the importance of humility. The importance of humility. I define humility as having a modest opinion of your importance, being courteously respectful, recognizing our insignificance, remember that others have talent. I think in our society, we really need humility. In a world filled with Snapchat, Tinder, and everything else, I think we've kind of forgotten how to be humble. How to be humble. I don't think you can listen to people if you're not humble. Watch how much people don't listen. They just wait for their turn to give their opinion. I don't think you can learn unless you're humble. 44 years as a professor, I find the students who want to learn are the ones who do learn. The students who come in knowing the answers, they don't learn a lot. I even think you probably have to be humble to love. You probably have to be humble to love. I also think the second lesson is the importance of fences. Robert Frost has that famous statement, good fences make good neighbors. You know, and take this in a philosophical way, okay? I think I became arrogant at that funeral. I started thinking of me, not of Johannes at the funeral. I was thinking about what I represented and what the symbols that was not the purpose of that funeral. The purpose of that funeral was to console Johannes and to remember his daughter. And if I had stayed, I would have become the center of attention, both because I looked differently and because I didn't speak the language. So I would have made mistakes. I would have stood at the wrong time or not stood at the wrong time and so forth. That was not the time. That was not the time to be making the statement, the arrogant statement I was starting to make. I forgot to be humble. Good friend, Elsie picked that up and got me out of there. Elsie picked that up and got me out of there. Once the elephants crossed the fence, or as Lonnie told me, don't cross the fence. In Disney, I would take that elephant by its trunk and walk off, and we'd live happily ever after in the bush. In reality, that's an elephant and I'm a human being, and we really can only live so close together. We need a fence between us. Even the monkey, once that monkey crossed into my house, he crossed the fence. There's some kind of barriers. There's something, I've used versions of this speech in various business settings, and I was speaking to a group of executives at Volvo, and this Volvo executive told me, he came up afterwards, and it turns out he ran all of their construction equipment worldwide. And he said, you've taught me why I'm not as good an executive as I should be. I said, I don't know, what do you mean? And he said, I keep trying to break down the fences to my subordinates. And then he said, they get too close to me and I feel disrespected. He said, he said, I'm the executive vice president, they're not. And I've got to keep a little bit of a fence there. It's an interesting metaphor. It's an interesting metaphor. And the last thing is the beautiful mysteries. I think elephants are absolutely fascinating animals. And when I wrote this book, Sitting with Elephants, which is, by the way, reflections of they're letters to my children, emails to my children back here. When I wrote this book, there's another book entitled The Elephant Whisperer, which is a really, really good book. And I wrote one of the co-authors, and I asked him if he'd be willing to read my version, my book, and he said he would. And we kind of became internet friends. And the main author of the previous book, his name was Lawrence Anthony, or Anthony Lawrence. And I was exchanging emails with Graham Spence. I knew that Anthony Lawrence had died. And I knew that he had died of a heart attack up in Kenya while he was visiting a zoo. And there were rumors around, there was kind of a legend around that when he died, the book is about the Sitting with, the Elephant Whisperer is about a book of elephants that were taken from near where I live onto his farm, and because they were causing too much damage, and he effectively tamed or kept them from becoming destructive 9 of the 10 elephants. And one had to be destroyed, and when they did the autopsy, they found it had a bad tooth, and so that was why the elephant couldn't be made livable or something like that. But there was a legend that when Lawrence Anthony died, the elephants came to his house before his wife knew about it and showed signs of mourning. I asked Graham Spence, I sent him an email and said, I've always heard that, is it true? And he wrote back to me and he said, it's totally true. He said, and I'll even share something else. He said, every year, not to the day that he died, but the week that he died, the elephants come back and go into mourning in his memory. And that was almost a decade ago that he had passed away. I've shared that story with a number of people in Africa, and they've shared similar stories of elephants mourning their dead, of coming back when babies die, that they will return to that site every year. I mean, there's a whole set of fascinating stories of what these animals seem to know. And I like to think of that as kind of the beautiful mystery. You know, in the business school, we seem to want to know why everything happens. Sometimes there's just things in business and maybe in life that's just a beautiful mystery, a beautiful mystery. Let me tell you the ending of the story. The next 2 years, the elephant did not come back. And then the last year, we were unable to go this year. So this would have been the summer of 2019. She came back, but would not come to the fence. she did bring some of her family, but she stayed about 50 to 100 meters to 100 yards away from the fence. And one time I went down to the fence to see what would happen if I did, and she charged, and I didn't feel like it was a mock charge, and I ran away instantly. My initial interpretation of that event was that she was not going to let us get that close to one another again. Some other people suggested maybe she thought you were going to touch the fence. I don't know. That's going to have to remain a beautiful mystery too. And that's my story about how to approach and sitting with elephants. I hope you're still out there listening. If you have any questions, feel free to fire them off. And I thank you. And I got one promotion thing. Thank you, and go TUARA.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, Ron, on so many different levels. Just a really beautiful story. If you have questions, people, please put them in the chat box, and we will look for those and hopefully answer them. So I don't see any yet. We'll give people
I only see a
minute.
wise ass comment from Larry Foster, which I could have expected.
Yep. I did see that. Anybody else have questions for Ron? I guess, so will you be going back this summer if possible?
Depending on COVID and a few personal things, yes. The plan is to go back for as long as I can. But
Okay.
again, some personal issues and some, and right now you can't go. You're
Right.
not allowed in, so it's not a possibility right now.
Does somebody take care of the house for you when you're not there?
That's a really good question. I hire two people. I hire one person to go and cut the nearby bush once a month. And then 2 weeks later, I have somebody go in there and clean the house.
Okay.
Whether they really do it or not, I have no idea.
I know.
And there's 18 African families living in there who clean it out before I come back.
Yeah.
I really don't know. But so far, we've not had any trouble with it or anything like that.
Well, we do have a few questions in the chat box. There's one: was Sally ever interested in joining you at the fence?
No. No. And to be perfectly honest, she said I was crazy. She actually, one of her requirements was that I made sure that I have my life insurance covered.
She's a wise woman, right? Someone else asked, says, Ron, what a beautiful story. So local authorities don't discourage your contact with the elephants?
Because it's a private area, no, they have not. They have not. They have not.
That's good.
Lonnie does not sit. Lonnie, he's got a different situation where he lives, Dot, and what he'll go up very, very close to them in a vehicle. He'll cross into their path. It's pretty interesting. He goes really close with cars.
Wow.
He goes really close with cars.
Let's see. Oh, somebody that's asked for the name of the hotel near the house. Would that be you can tell us if that's a good place to go.
It's called the Protea Hotel at Kruger Gate.
Okay.
The Protea Hotel at Kruger Gate.
Do they have a lot of Americans come there for safaris and that kind of thing?
Yes, and if you go to visit, rather than just staying there, and Dot Martin knows this, others, you can also look. There are places to stay in Kruger Park that are they are not nice, but they are very. You can go in the park. You're not allowed to get out of the car. People are fenced in, not the animals. But there are places inside the park where you can spend the night and so forth. And so when you're fenced in, you're allowed to get out of your car. So the Kruger Park, the Protea Hotel is very nice, but don't miss. I can't think of there's a website right now. I can't think of it right now. It's but I can, if somebody emails me, I can tell them where to find the lodgings in Kruger Park.
Cool. Let's see, what else do we have? Somebody says, perhaps the elephant had associated you with the shock from the fence at the last encounter and did not trust you anymore. So,
That's possible. And that was why, that's why I never could figure out how to interpret the charge.
Yeah.
And again, it'll be interesting this year, because not going back this year, whether she'll come back at all or not in the future, I don't know.
mhm. Yeah, she might. Okay. That's the questions I see. Are there other questions? If not,
Thank you for listening.
yes.
I look forward
Thanks.
to the next TUARA speech.
Yes, and if anybody has an idea for one, would like to do one themselves, or know somebody who they think would have an interesting story to tell, please let us know. We're looking for ideas for future presentations like this. And let me also remind you of I don't think I gave you the location for the membership dues and mask and donation event next week. It's the parking lot across from Moody Music Building. It's next to the new deck there, the capstone deck, but it'll be in the surface lot. And, you know, with students gone now, it should not be crowded at all. And we'll have some signs out there, and hope to see a lot of people come through. Let's see, let me see if there's any more comments here. Let's see. Well, Ron, you've got some thank yous and great presentations there that you can look at.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, everybody. And I think that will be the end of it. Merry Christmas, and hope to see you next week at our drive-through.